This is talking about our work developing sort of computational thinking stuff at St. Mary's. I'm Alan Jameson. I'm the Department Chair of Mathematics and Computer Science at St. Mary's. I am a professor of computer science. I want to be very, very clear here. I'm not an ed studies faculty member.
I'm Lindsay Jameson. I'm an associate professor of computer science, and people thought I was very brave in my first year teaching when I went over to the ed studies faculty and said, no, they didn't teach me how to do this. Come tell me how to do this better. So we're going to talk a little bit about what we've learned now from doing more ed studies type stuff. So
some background about St. Mary's. We are a small liberal arts college over on the western shore of the Chesapeake. We are a public liberal arts college. We have approximately 1,500 students. Our CS major graduates about 25 students per year. Our minor varies between year to year. It can be as few as 8, it could be as many as 40. We also have one master's program at St. Mary's. It is the Master's of Arts in Teaching, and that produces about 28 graduates per year. There's also an Ed Studies minor that's associated with the Ed Studies department at St. Mary's, but there's not a dedicated undergraduate major. So it's one of those little extra aspects there. We have secondary certifications in history, English, math, social studies, biology, chemistry, physics, theater, but nothing dedicated to computer science. And there's no CS pathway right now at St. Mary's, despite the need in the region. We have a lot of tech companies. We're very, very tech-based. And this has sort of contributed to a couple of different things, different challenges that I'll talk about here in a second. But it also contributes to a desperate need for CS certification in our area. So the goals for our grant was to start to develop a secondary pathway for computer science certification, specifically targeting the CS Praxis exam, develop a computational thinking for teachers course as part of that pathway, especially targeted toward sort of the K through 8 teachers, and how they can integrate some of the computational thinking ideas into their lesson plans, regardless of what the subject is. And one of the big things for us is to also develop a way to introduce education career pathways to CS majors and minors. At St. Mary's, over the last 13 years, we have had exactly 0 CS majors go on to our MAT program, and go on to any MAT program anywhere. As far as I know, over 13 years and hundreds of CS majors, we have 0 students that are in education pathways outside of higher education. And then the last thing is to get students one of our core requirements, which is called Experiencing Liberal Arts in the World, which just gets the students to basically go out into the real world, quote unquote, real world, and use their skills that they developed as liberal arts students to, support, whether that's an internship or in education or community service or something like that, be able to apply those skills. The execution of the course that we developed as part of the grant involved basically 3 big steps. One is recruitment. We very specifically wanted, at least for the pilot program, to have a blend of ed studies minors and computer science majors. We did data collection, doing biographical data, including major and minor, as well as pre and post CT tests, just to gauge where their knowledge was based on the Bebris test. And then we split that, the course actually into 2 phases: classroom introduction to what CT actually is, how you integrate it, what tools you have access to, and then them actually going out into the community and doing a placement.
So this is where I get to jump in because I was actually teaching the class. We started out with an overview of what computational thinking is. The students that we actually had in the class were majority computer science majors, but we also had these two ed studies minors in there, one of whom is a math major. The other one is majoring in political science, and both of them had very little to no expertise in computer science. They'd not taken our introductory courses, nothing. So we needed to define what computational thinking was and have them see where what they did already was computational thinking. We just needed to add vocabulary. And then for the CS majors, we needed to go in, majors and minors, we needed to go in and say, okay, you know these computational thinking things, here's how you learned it, here's how other people learn it. We gave them time to demo and play with tools. Tools here means toys. These are very similar to the toys that we all got to play with in the professional development that Diane ran over the last summer. They will look very familiar to those of you who participated when I get into some of the pictures we took when we actually were able to do this. I required them to look at the Maryland CS standards and connect, when I asked them to make lesson plans, what they were doing with the actual CS standards so that they could understand, especially the computer science students who hadn't necessarily thought about these things this way, what they were being asked to do and how the students would be learning it. We also talked, because most of these students had no educational studies experience before, about what to expect in the classroom, what they should see, what they should expect to do, how they should expect to act, how they should expect the students to act, and what they could ask the students to do and how to do it. And there was a lot of anxiety on the part of my students, because they remembered, we were working specifically with 3rd through 8th graders, and a lot of them remembered with some angst their time as middle school students, and the idea of going into a middle school classroom, even though they're not in that space anymore, was really a challenge for them. And then every time they would be in the classroom, they would do their placements on Fridays, and then on Monday, we would meet and they would do a debrief. What worked, what didn't, what could they do better next time, what things would they want to think about. This was not just me giving them feedback, but also peer evaluation, because they were all working together on this. Sorry. So our actual placement was at the Chesapeake Public Charter School, which is a local K-8 public charter school that has an additional focus on environmental stewardship. The fun thing about this particular school is that although you have a lottery to be able to attend this school, a lot of faculty members play the lottery game and win. So a lot of the students in the school have a relationship with our college, usually a faculty member as a parent. Which made it really nice, because then I could take pictures in our elective and then just contact my colleague and say, hey, I took this picture of your child for my grant that I have. Do you mind if I use the picture? So you'll see those here in a couple minutes. The electives are 60-minute classes related around a topic, around a theme, that can be run by volunteers, which was really nice for us. There were scheduled to be 8 meetings per elective, starting about a month after we started our spring semester and ending on our last day of spring semester. That was the plan. The students are given a title and a 3-sentence description, and they make a preference list, and then the school assigns them to their electives given those preferences. They're broken up by age group. The kindergartners don't actually get to do electives run by volunteers. From what I've seen, that's a good idea. I did a 1st and 2nd grade elective about a year ago and realized that that is definitely not my age range. The students were able to choose which age groups to work with, and they chose, we had 15 students in the class, and they chose to work with 3rd through 5th graders and 6th through 8th graders in 2 groups. And usually there's about 12 to 18 students per elective, depending on the needed resources of the elective. So here's some pictures from our 3rd to 5th grade groups. We were able to do the placements. They met 3 times before spring break. So they did 3 of them, which is better than none of them. And you can see what the 3rd through 5th graders did. One of the early meetings was the Rubik's Cube, learning how to solve it. And the idea here was to teach them the computational thinking, the algorithm for it, but also the problem solving that goes into developing the algorithm. And then the next week they did cave planks, and they had worked through the various challenges, but their final challenge was to work as a group, which is a problem solving thing of its own. We were in the library, so they ended up having the challenge to build the tallest possible tower that could, and that was the original challenge, and then they did that really fast. So the new challenge was to build the tallest possible tower that could support the most books. And so the nice thing there was that my students were on the fly developing, what do I do if the students finish my activity early? Because they had to make it last an hour, because it wasn't like, oh, well, if I finish early, then the normal classroom teacher just takes over, because they weren't in their normal classroom. Right. The middle school students were next door in the next room, and that was nice for the two of us to supervise. They had similar projects, but it was different people running it, different people organizing it. So they started out with the cava planks as something that they were being asked to similarly come up with a tall tower version. This was the tall tower, the first tall tower. Then another group saw this one and combined with another group, and with twice as many bricks was able to make it taller. And so we figured out pretty quickly that with 6th through 8th graders, you want to have a competition. So the next week they had these Botley robots, which honestly I thought they were going to think was totally dumb, really too baby, that just not at all interesting. And they ended with basically Botley soccer. And so you can see that they're in a rectangular area with the ball. They were divided into 2 teams. Each team would roll a die and program in that many commands for the Botley to execute. And then they'd hand the remote to the other team. So it's one Botley going, and they had to go through and see who could score the ball first. And this was a big hit with the students. So our idea was that we would do pre-test in class. It would be great. Everybody's there. You hand them the test. They do the test. You take it. You put it away, and you look at it in the summer. This worked perfectly for the pre-test. We was going to do the same thing with the post-test, and then COVID. So I did that online. I administered it in May. I sent a reminder. I asked them very nicely to participate in this, and I got 5 answers. So I haven't done any comparisons because those pre-tests are still on my desk at school, and will remain there until I'm allowed back in. But I did look at the post-test. It was 1 person who has no CS background, 2 people who were CS minors, and 2 people who were CS majors, which I thought was an interesting mix, and it gives us a lot of interesting things. There were 13 distinct questions on each test, pre and post test. When looking at the post test data, there were 4 questions where everybody agreed on the answer. They were correct. I did check that part. They all agreed on the correct answer. There were 4 questions where all but 1 participant agreed on an answer that was the correct answer. And it was not the same person who got a different answer each time. And there were 2 questions where 4 distinct answers were given. And they were not, some of them were multiple choice, some of them were not. And these were not all multiple choice questions where they got 4 different answers. So I'm going to take a look at that because I think that's going to be really interesting information in the future.
So one of the things that I like to look at as far as the current situation is as many silver linings as I can find. We had 15 total students in the class, and our recruitment strategy to bring in CS majors to sort of expose them to the educational pathways was a success. Out of the 15 total students, 9 of them were CS majors. In addition, 4 total students are now strongly considering education as a career choice. We only had 2 prior to that, and the 2 that are strongly considering it are CS-based students, whether one of them is a CS minor, one of them is a CS major. This would be fantastic because, again, in 13 years, we haven't had a single CS major go on to education. So this would be good, right? This is a significant leap in progress. We did get approval for this to count as the Experiencing Liberal Arts in the World requirement. So everybody got that requirement checked off. The students now understand some of the challenges that teachers face on sort of a day-to-day basis. They have a greater appreciation for what it takes to actually do education, especially in the K through 8 area. And we got to get a lot of really cool toys and be able to use them. And some of them are in our house right now to entertain our 5 and 9-year-old. So you know, we weren't able to use it with the classroom the entire time, but we are still using them. The next steps for us is to fully flesh out the CS pathway. We started to do some praxis alignment in our computer science intro sequence. We're going to continue that work over the next few years to make sure that eventually we get to a computer science education minor. This was requested specifically by our ed studies faculty, and so we would like to keep them happy. So we're going to do that. And to move some of the CS courses around so that our in-service teachers can take that, whether it's moving some of them online now that we have broken the seal on whether or not to go online, or to the evenings and during our summers. And for us, that's our report. That's what we've got. I noticed that there were a couple of questions. How do MAT